Alright, so last time I had read Volume 3 of the Griz series, which I've updated the title of since the video, but I'm going to wait until it's published to probably mention what the title is what the new title is. But now we're gonna move on to Volume 4 of the Griz series, where I'll be reading similar stuff to what I read in Volume 3. Just a couple of ideas and some excerpts, descriptions and stuff. So Volume 4 is known as Aurea, Griz's last name, which I brought up in Volume 2, but then never expounded upon or anything, and this here will explain why Griz himself never introduced himself by first and last name. And also, before I get too far in here, by starting with descriptions and such, I will bring up the fact that I of course use many different races from the fantasy genre, and orcs were mentioned in Volume 1, and in Volume 2 I had mentioned something known as the Osin, O-S-I-N, all lowercase, not to be confused with Sin, the dragon, by name. And so the Osin is a general term that I used for in place of demi-human. It ties all of the demi-humans together. And so I'm gonna start with descriptions of a couple of the characters in here, but a couple of the descriptions I have for some of the things may sound slightly repetitive, so I hope during the editing process those will either be worked out or polished. So the first character we meet, or that Griz meets, okay. So I'll read a good portion of the description for the first character that we meet, who is a dwarf. The dwarf turned then to face Griz squarely. The faint red light of Sin's realm fell upon the dwarf's features, letting Griz view his savior completely. The dwarf he looked upon had deep gray hair, an ornately decorated and braided beard, and bronze skin, but something about him told Griz that he was no surface dwarf. Perhaps it was the sulphur yellow eyes, so vibrant and yet almost acidic. These eyes were nothing like that of the dwarfs Griz had met before. Anyone who has worked with me on any of my stuff will probably know that here I'm describing a subspecies, I suppose I could say, of dwarf, and I'll leave it up to the reader to, find out more about this this dwarf. So I won't mention his name or anything, or specifically how many subspecies of different races there are, but I do believe I mentioned, maybe not in the past couple of volumes, but I have mentioned it before in one of my writings, I think, before these more in-depth ones, about not just wood elves, but also high elves and deep wood elves. I'm hoping to expound a bit more upon maybe all of this by the time this first arc of the short story series gets done. So the next, after the dwarf, we meet our first named orc of the series, and this here, along with that first dwarf with the yellow eyes, becomes one of Griz's new friends. Um, keep going. I'll have to come back because I just went past the description for the high elf, because the next person after the orc that Griz meets is a high elf. Dun dun dun. Okay, so I'll read an excerpt from what is written here out loud. The orc was obviously battle-worn. The orc was black in skin, almost like the sludge found in tar pits, and he bore no hair. Scars were dug deep into many parts of the orc's skin, and some resembled scales. A couple people who have heard some of my ideas for the writings will probably understand who this character is, or what my attempt for the character was, but since these aren't, since none of this is published yet, maybe this will end up being sent out during the editing process, or I might get the chance to expound upon some of this before we reach volume 10 for this arc. And then we'll be ending this arc of Griz's story at volume 10, and hopefully the next arc will either be, let's say, less than 20. I may keep each arc to about 10 volumes. We'll see how that works out. Okay, so the High Elf. Oh, I went a little too far. Okay. So this High Elf, she was gaunt, having been staving off hunger by taking the smallest portions and fewest drinks. I'm not sure I go into too much depth about the rest of her description, but the idea is she is very, very fair of skin. She has little experience with direct sunlight, I'd wager. However, I wouldn't say she gets completely blotched by being attacked by the sun. I'd say she may be somewhat golden. Not wholly, of course. It's probably more of an effect from the fact that she's an elf, that she's probably considered gold. And for a fact, I'd say that unlike August, no wait, oh sorry, what? Snow Eye. Unlike Snow Eye from Volume 1, who I would have to say is a brunette, and probably has her other eye is the one that isn't completely white, hence her name is either brown or green. I'd have to say this high elf, who I name further in here, so she's blonde of hair, and I'd have to say her eyes are probably blue, because I don't think a wood elf and a high elf would share too many aspects similar to one another, except for the very prominent ears that a lot of elves have. Here, so I mentioned as well that the dwarf was deeply attuned to the rock, and even cut and carved stone, such as like what you'd see in castles or really fine halls, maybe even marble. The dwarves would be able to tell through a short moment of meditation that through the stone they could feel light emanations, like a troop marching down a hall or a bigger creature sleeping in another room. This was probably a trait that all dwarves had to have developed to help with working in caves, because you don't want to go working along and all of a sudden you're digging directly into the sleeping chamber of a nesting dragon. That sort of thing is in a lot of fantasy genres that contain dwarves, or fantasy books containing dwarves. They would need to understand the stone and work with the stone to discover the best paths through it. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to a conversation that all of them have. I won't name the orc, and I won't name the high elf nor will I name the dwarf that I described. I'll leave all those to be found out by reading this. I will say that this high elf is she's the foster daughter of a great deep wood elven scholar. And so, I believe Volume 4 for sure brings up some of the other genres of, subspecies of elf that I have. But, in a much bigger project that I'm working on, I discuss and describe all the different subspecies of elf, but I don't go too much further in that one concerning any dwarven subspecies, because I simply describe dwarves and then surface dwarves, which there can't be much difference other than where they work. Okay. So, I'll make sure to, stop myself if I begin to read, certain character names, but I'm gonna read through a good portion of this to give you the story for, a portion of the story for, Griz's father. And I'll also probably, I think I'll stop before I get to the portion concerning, Griz's mother. When we were still on the surface, Blank and I worked for the great city of Tunato, home of the Deep Wood Elves. We were the personal guards of a highly important warrior, slayer of some dragon that plagued the south in the time of Serpent Queen Berheova. Griz interrupts here, and he asks, "You mean the woman who brought about the Abyss Curse?" I'll hopefully be able to expound more upon Berheova, come perhaps next, arc. Yes, the dwarf answered. Before she betrayed the mortal realm, this warrior was none other than your father. He was a dark elf, first and last of that kind in our world. He was called Bronskar, after the name he gave his war axe. His axe was a mighty weapon, used for cleaving many monsters' heads, and no head was more fitting for cleaving than the dragon's. Aurea was the surname he used, and it was the only other name he trusted us with. Oh. That portion of the story is a little shorter than I expected, but, here, the dwarf mentions Aurea, the surname of Griz's father. And so Griz himself, in the following paragraph, Griz held on to what he was just told, all this news concerning what his father was, which implies what he is, who his father had worked for, where his father had been, and the fact, as I word it here, that his father did not share his true first name. For a moment, Griz thought of only one word, Aurea, his last name. And so, here, I'll have to expound more in the next arc for Griz's coming to terms with his last name and the fact that he does have more of an identity than what he was and what he is now becoming. He has the identity of Aurea, his being the son of his father, who I don't think anyone from the West would have known, because that's where Griz was raised, to the furthest west over in Furo. I don't think anyone in the West would have known anything about Griz's father or his deeds. Not many people in Sarah, which is mentioned in Volume 2 and is continuously used in Volume 3. Many people in Sarah probably only heard vague comments on Bronskar's deeds, and only Tunato would have the true details, because Tunato was Bronskar's home for a good amount of time, but that had to have been after his deeds further south in the lands of Serpent Queen Berheova. Dun, dun, dun. Let me... Okay, so let me read a portion of what the dwarf reads. Of what the dwarf says. Once across the seas, in a land called Faroe, I think, Bronskar settled in one of the minor towns near the northern coast. Bronskar fell in love with a mortal woman, a human, and together they made you. And here he is speaking to Griz. I was not around by the time you were born, and I won't mention a portion of this because, spoilers. But, the humans did not care that Bronskar was a dark elf, but they seemed to believe that your mother was a witch, even though she was one of Light's most devout on Faroe. And, I just got done reading a couple stuff on Joan of Arc, and, it's a little too accurate now, looking at this, that, this may or may not hint towards a lot of what happens with, extremely devout women, or otherwise. I want to point out that, Griz's mother is not based on her, now that I've brought her up. But, so, Bronskar doesn't have Griz's red hair. Bronskar is a dark elf, as we would probably imagine a dark elf. Whether that be, completely white of hair, completely black of hair, and I like the concept for dark elves having black hair, and being even more attuned to the shadow that we assume dark elves to rely upon. But not every dark elf, I think, is a stealthy fighter. It's actually Griz's mother that he gets his hair from. I don't know if I mentioned that at all in here. No, I don't think I mentioned it. But it's Griz's father it's Griz's mother that he gets his hair from. His mother had extremely vibrant red hair, and because of the fact that his parents are dead, I'm not sure there's not too much that I can expound upon concerning the two of them. But I'm glad to share more of what I have here concerning the Griz series, and I hope this grabs some people's attention concerning the series, because the lore for it, the world for it, is getting deeper and being built further. And here as well, we even have this dwarf who is one of Griz's new friends. Call him Griz Area, rather than calling him Griz the Unholy or Hero in Tainted Clothing. Griz the Unholy would probably be the more prominent name to be used because of any news, potentially, that may have spread from west over up in Faroe to over in Sarah, or perhaps further beyond. But I don't think Griz's titles would have moved beyond maybe the western parts of Sarah. They probably would have stayed within Faroe and some of the western Saran coastline. Okay, so I think that'll be it for Volume 4. I'll probably, since I have the time, I'll record a bit for Volume 5 as well, and I won't mention Volume 5's title in the next video, sadly. And I'll probably just describe, like, a particular creature, or maybe just discuss what I had planned for Volume 5, or what I'll probably discuss a little bit on Volume 5, and then skip to what I had originally had in mind for Volume 6. But currently I have something much different written for Volume 6, and I like what I have going for Volume 6. When I get the chance to record again, I'll make sure to go over what I do have presently available for Volume 6, and I'll make sure to discuss small portions that didn't make the cut, I think, but I will probably end up using or hinting back to.